From the headquarters of Tell Us Your English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I am Soini Gray. We start with a new day for Central American migrants on their way to the United States. The struggles faced by the first two caravans of migrants trying to cross into Mexico hasn't stopped others from leaving in search of a better future. Now, a third group of migrants from El Salvador is making its way across Guatemala.
A number of Salvadorian churches are holding mass prayers for the hundreds of migrants that left the country heading to the United States. They want those people to be safe.
We have made a call on all churches that are on the way to the United States, and even churches in the United States, to please open their hearts to these migrants.
The first caravan, made up of 400 people, walked towards the country's western border. Truck drivers offered to take them in their vehicles so they could get there faster.
There might be more work over there than over here. There's nothing here, only crime. We are in a very bad situation.
The caravan was accompanied by police, aid workers, and human rights activists. Processing at the border was swift, thanks to an increase in border agents to help those migrants. Only those without the correct documentation were returned to San Salvador.
There were about 28 or 30 people who did not have their documents in order, so they were sent back.
There have been calls on social media to form a new caravan set to leave on Wednesday. This, as the people continue to flee.
Despite attacks from both the Guatemalan and Mexican police, the second migrant caravan succeeded in crossing into Mexico on Monday. After being blocked on Sunday, they struggled to cross the Suchiache River in a desperate attempt to flee Honduras to reach the United States. Some could be seen carrying their children into the water as police officers waited for them on the Mexican shore. Activists have condemned the use of a police helicopter as it increases the risk of migrants drowning. Our correspondent in Mexico, Pablo Perez, is following one group from the caravan, and he brings us this report.
Well, we're right here in the middle of the road between Ciudad Hidalgo, Chiapas, Mexico, and Tapachula, which is going to be the destiny for today's trip of the migrant caravan. This is a small group. It's only about 800, 1,000 people strong, and they have chosen to stay here under the shadow of these tropical trees because the heat is too much for the mostly formed by women and a small children caravan. Other group, mostly men, they have kept going, and they say, as far as we know, that they are already in Tapachula City, where they're going to establish themselves in the Tapachula's Central Park. They are gonna deliberate then what's going to be their next step. But they are thinking of taking one day off at Tapachula to regain the forces. Remember that just yesterday they crossed the Suchiate River with great risk and opposition of the federal police, Mexican federal police. So they are exhausted now, and they only want to get to Tapachula to catch a breath, and then keep on going for over 1,000 miles, which is the way they have to go until the next border.
We thank Pablo Perez for that report. On the 11th day of their journey, the first group of the migrant caravan arrived in the community of Santiago Niltepec in the southern Mexico state of Oaxaca.
Before the sun can burn their skin and make the road unbearable to walk on, thousands of migrants left the town of Tapanetepec in Oaxaca. They were nervous when passing by the checkpoint monitored by the National Migration Institute, but everything went okay. The important thing for them was to find at least a little space in any vehicle to make the walk a little shorter.
We wait for a ride. This is hard because sometimes they can't take us and our 2 little girls.
Women and children are the ones who struggle the most to continue, but they show their strength and refuse to stop.
I am a single mother with 4 kids. I want them to go to school, and I can't do it on my own. It's difficult to feed them and buy them clothes. We left so they can prosper and have a better life.
The towns that have stopped that have provided support for all children. The little ones are aware of the effort their parents make and the reason for which they left their country.
My mom had no job, and my real dad forced us out of the house with a machete. He sent gangs after us.
Yaini couldn't take care of her 4 kids anymore. She makes traditional Honduran baleadas and sells them to her caravan mates.
We came to work, not to do bad things, as I say. I said this because I need to feed my kids, and I work for it.
The first group remains together. More than 5,000 Central Americans stay strong, regardless of threats made by the US president, who already announced he will send military troops to stop them.
The Bolivian President Evo Morales has slammed the US government's decision to send 5,200 troops to the Mexican border in an attempt to stop the migrant caravan. In a tweet, Morales said while thousands of Central American migrants escaped from hunger and violence caused by neoliberal exploitation imposed by the U.S. in their countries, Trump sends his troops to the U.S.-Mexico border. And President Trump has said that he is planning to sign an executive order to end birthright citizenship. In an interview with local media, Trump said the idea of people coming to the United States and having a baby to gain citizenship is ridiculous. If the executive order is made, babies born in the United States will no longer be automatically considered citizens. One person has been killed in Honduras after security forces started firing at people protesting against a mining project in the northeast of the country. Video posted on social media records gunfire as at least 1,000 police and soldiers tried to evict protesters from the site. Community members from the municipality of Colón have been resisting for almost 3 months. They say the mining project is contaminating several water sources used by 14 communities in the Baja Aguan area. On Monday, after a 6-hour hearing, the lawsuit of the WikiLeaks founder, Julian Assange, against the government of Ecuador was rejected by a court in the capital, Quito. Our correspondent, Denise Herrera, has the details.
It took 20 minutes for Judge Karina Martinez to make the decision that the arguments presented by Julian Assange's legal team were irrelevant. She ruled that Assange must follow the new rules laid out for him by the Ecuadorian government. According to the prosecutor, this new rule seeks to improve his living conditions in the Ecuadorian embassy.
They cannot demand that the Ecuadorian government do something that does not correspond to them. Mr. Assange and his lawyers have to reach an agreement with the British government, and that's it.
The ruling is in our side. The Ecuadorian state saw the need to regulate Mr. Assange's living conditions inside the diplomatic mission in London.
One of Julian Assange's lawyers, Carlos Poveda, questioned the judge's decision, saying it was unjustified, and some statements made by the prosecutor. He confirmed they plan to appeal the decision.
During the hearing, we get more input than a sentence. The subject of the claim is that the UK has issued a type of security assurance so that Julian Assange may leave the embassy. Obviously, we asked the government to show it. As the prosecutors expressed, it is that the United Kingdom, via simple letters, has stated that Julian Assange cannot be extradited to a country where there's a death sentence. Our concern goes further. A petition which states that Julian Assange will not be extradited to the United States.
During the hearing, the WikiLeaks founder stressed that his life is at risk and that other WikiLeaks members have already received death threats. He accused the Ecuadorian government of leaking scandalous material about him as a way to eventually justify his extradition to the United States. Denise Herrera, Telesur, Ecuador.
We'll take a short break now. More news in a minute. Welcome back. In his first interview after winning the presidential election in Brazil, Jair Bolsonaro has said he may treat social movements as terrorists. One of the movements he referred to was the Landless Workers Movement, or the MST. He said he is not interested in having any sort of dialogue with members of social movements. Bolsonaro also said that the new gun law will be a priority as it will give civilians the right to carry weapons. He has also said that he supports the privatization of state companies. The newly elected president also announced he invited the judge Sergio Moro to serve on the country's Supreme Court. Moro was the judge responsible for prosecuting the former president, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, leading to his imprisonment. The judge has not given an official answer yet, but he has already expressed his willingness to accept the offer to local media outlets. Now, there have been different reactions over the recent victory of President-elect Jair Bolsonaro. Social organizations in Brazil have announced a protest against him in the coming hours under the motto, "Between exile and prison, we choose the streets." Social movements are calling for the first national demonstration against the far-right president to take place in Sao Paulo. So joining us now live is Benjamin Young. He teaches anthropology at the State University of New York and is currently a visiting professor at the State University of Pernambuco, which is in the northeast of Brazil. Thank you, Benjamin, for joining us. You are currently based in the northeast of Brazil, a region that has been insulted by Jair Bolsonaro and which voted massively for the Workers' Party candidate, Fernando Haddad. How do you explain the opposition to Bolsonaro in that region of Brazil?
Right. Well, it's a pleasure to be here. So there has been for a long time and remains a lot of love for Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. Evidence of the things he was able to accomplish in the Northeast, and he's from the Northeast, of course, and in the city of Recife, you need only walk a block outside of your house and you'll see evidence in the form of public works projects, etc. So there's a lot of visible evidence of the things that he and his party were able to do, the PT, the Workers' Party, when he was in office. However, the man is in prison, and the PT, unfortunately, has become a symbol of all that is wrong in Brazilian politics. In my view, that's somewhat undeserved because corruption predates the PT, and one of the ways that the PT has distinguished itself is that it was able to actually alleviate poverty on a massive scale, despite maintaining a certain level of corruption. So I guess you could say that hatred for the PT was something separate from love for Lula, and the PT candidate was the victim of an immense hatred for the PT.
So Benjamin, tell us a bit more about the geographical, social, and even racial divide in Brazil that the election has revealed so clearly.
Certainly. So as you may know, the northeastern region of Brazil, which is the poorest region of Brazil, is the one region of Brazil where the PT candidate won overwhelmingly with just almost 70% of voters. In most other regions of the country, it's the flip. And that reflects a historical pattern, which is that political and economic power has long, for centuries, actually been concentrated in the south and southeastern part of the country. And that is the part of the country that voted overwhelmingly in favor of Bolsonaro. And so one reading of this election is an assertion of the haves over the have-nots and a statement that they are not interested in the ongoing project of poverty alleviation. However, I think that's not an entirely complete interpretation. I do think that there is a real and legitimate growing frustration with political corruption and with the growing problem of crime and violence in people's cities. And for better or for worse, people have perceived Bolsonaro. He successfully portrayed himself as someone who will resolve that problem through an authoritarian or strong-handed manner of governance.
So Benjamin, in one of his interviews on Monday, the president-elect threatened to treat social movements like the MST as terrorists. What are the implications of that?
Yes. So, well, one wants to try to be positive in a difficult time. So we'll see what he actually does. We know that there is a disconnect between what he says and what he does. However, I think there is very good reason for women, for Afro-Brazilians, and for LGBT Brazilians, and frankly for Northeasterners, to be seriously concerned. This is a man who said on several occasions that if his son were gay, the best thing that could happen would be that he die in a car accident. And one can only take that as a joke so many times, and he said it several times. So I think that it will be hard for him to have the heavy-handed approach that he says he will have, because he is an extreme right candidate, and he will have to build coalitions to actually do anything successfully. But my fear is that there will be social movement protests, that of course there already are, that he will inflict a very heavy-handed, disproportionately heavy-handed response by the military police, and someone will get killed. And of course, I hope that doesn't happen, but that's where a deep civil conflict that can take this to a whole nother level, where the new president feels that he has license to declare some sort of state of emergency. That's where that possibility becomes real, and we should all be very concerned about that.
We've already heard that that protests are being organized against this sitting president. How do you see opposition to the new government developing, especially in the Northeast, especially since his language has been very harsh, and you just mentioned that you're concerned about of him abusing civil society. But do you think that civil society is afraid, or do you think that they will continue and opposition to this sitting president will grow?
Well, I'll give you an honest response to that question. Right now, civil society is in a state of shock and is traumatized, and it is exhausted and is underslept.
Why do you say they're shocked though, Benj? Because, I mean, the results, the polls have always said that Bolsonaro had taken hold. And while civil society was very active in trying to prevent that from happening, the polls never really shifted in Haddad's favor. So is shock the right word?
I appreciate your comment. The thing is, in Pernambuco, there really was a real turn in the last couple of weeks, and I think activists and social movement militants really were hopeful about this election. And it's possible that on some level they were in a bubble, because of course all of us knew what the national opinion polls said, which were overwhelmingly predicting that Bolsonaro would win this election. But I believe that, you know, as in with any defeat, there's a period of kind of rethinking what the next steps are. And if Brazil is anything, it is a vibrant civil society, and there will be massive popular protests on different levels, including in social media, WhatsApp, and Facebook in the weeks to come, for sure.
Thank you so much, Benjamin Young. We really appreciate you talking to us, especially since you have a flight to catch. Have a safe flight. New campaigns in Bolivia are promoting an end to gender violence. This is due to the high number of femicides that have been registered in the country.
Various government organizations have joined together to promote campaigns against violence to women.
There have been 100 femicides in our country. If we compare it to Spain, a country that has 4 times more people than Bolivia, Spain only had 48 femicides. That is less than half.
In Bolivia, an average of 100 femicides are reported per year. This means the violent death of a woman every 3 days, and almost always at the hands of their partner.
They can be our mothers, they can be our sisters, they can be our daughters, and it can happen to ourselves. We do not want to be killed just because we are women.
Men and children play an important role in stopping this. We have to be more conscious of protecting the rights of women. This must come from the family, the schools, the universities. It's fundamental that we change our culture.
According to the United Nations, violence against women starts in different forms: physical, sexual, psychological, but they eventually lead to death, which is almost always followed by impunity.
Latin America is the region with the largest number of femicides worldwide. We have to be ashamed of this. We are the most violent region. Evidently, there is something we have to do as a region and as a society. Bolivia is the fourth country with the largest number of femicides in the region after Nicaragua, Honduras, and El Salvador.
Bolivia has established preventive legislation to deal with gender violence. It punishes 16 different types of violence. In 2016, the United Nations launched the Únete campaign with the color orange as its symbol.
Time for the second break of this program. World News is next. Welcome back. Dominica and China have signed a $120 million Eastern Caribbean dollar economic and technical agreement. The news comes amid the United States warning developing countries against dealing with China. Prime Minister Roosevelt Skerrit has dismissed suggestions that the island is being used by China to advance its influence globally. He added that Dominica has nothing to offer China but solidarity and friendship, and that those who heed the U.S. warnings are propagating foolishness. A top South African lawyer has been shot dead while dropping his child off at school. According to the police, Pete Mihalik was in his vehicle when he was shot in the head and fatally wounded. Paramedics arrived on the scene but were unable to save him. The police have said one suspect has been arrested in connection with the murder and is being questioned by detectives. South Sudan's rebel leader and former Vice President Riek Machar will return to the capital, Juba, this week to take part in a peace ceremony. It will be the first time he sets foot in the city since he fled 2 years ago when an earlier peace deal collapsed. South Sudan's civil war began in 2013 when the country's president accused Machar of plotting a coup. The war has resulted in thousands of deaths, mass rapes, and the forced recruitment of child soldiers. And 1 week ago, the Calypso world was thrown into mourning with the death of Winston Bailey, the mighty Shadow. The Trinidadian musical legend was laid to rest on Tuesday with a funeral benefiting a Calypso king at the Queen's Park Savannah, the traditional staging of the annual Dimash competition, which Shadow won in 2000, making him the Calypso king of that year. Shadow was also conferred with a doctorate of letters from the UWI on Sunday, 4 days after his death. For his funeral, he requested that mourners wear white in contrast with his traditional all-black garb as a performer.
Think about it. This is a man who has stayed relevant for 5 decades. 70 to 80 hits. 80 to 90 hits. 90 to 2000 hits. And if he was here today, we would have had some more hits. That's right. Because that is the kind of fella that Winston Bailey was now. And I mean, I use the word was because I'm referring that to physical and flesh. But that man can't dead. That man immortalized himself in all the minds, Jed. That up to today, anything different is a Shadow vibes. And any baseline that bounces a different way is a Shadow vibes. You understand? We just talk about soca, but soca is drum and bass. Who is drum and bass? Shadow vibes. You understand what I'm saying?
Rest in peace to the bassman. And we've come to the end of this news brief. For these and many other stories, you can find them on our website, tellus4tv.net/English. And join us on social media because we are on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Tell Us Your English, I'm Sony Gray. Thank you for watching.